If you think that writing a book is too challenging, or maybe you think it's only for writers who are masters at technique and prose, you would be wrong. I am calling you out because the thing is, we all have a story inside of us. And when you run a business, it's often based on the experience that you have and the expertise that you have doing what you're already great at. Welcome to the Entrepreneur Success Summit interview series. I'm your host, Kelly Sinclair. I'm a brand and marketing coach, a.k.a. the Fairy Brand Mother, and I work with passionate entrepreneurs who want to get visibility for your business, for your brand, and for your purpose. And my guest today is the wonderful, sweet Jessica Suggs. She is a lifelong book enthusiast, and she helps build author platforms through exceptional book concept and editing, book formatting and design, self-publication support, and author brand and book marketing. So excited to chat with you today, Jessica.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Okay, let's jump right in and tell people a little bit about what you do and who you help.
Okay, well, I help authors from every step of the authorship road, from dreaming up a book, having the courage to start the book, all the way through the entire book process, the self-publication process, and then telling the world about their book. So all of those pieces I help them with. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it's such. And so can you put into perspective for us just like what the scope of that whole process is? Because that sounds like a lot. Like I know some people, they take years to write a book, and then you have to, like, the marketing piece is so important because what's that stat? Like 95% of books on shelves sell less than 1,000 copies or something, or 100 even maybe.
Right. Yeah. I think that's it's a common misconception to think that once you've written a book, people are automatically going to buy it. But they won't buy it if they don't hear about it. And so that's where the marketing piece comes in is, and marketing feels like a really fancy word, but to me, all it is telling other people about something that you love and are passionate about. So it's telling other people about your mission or your book or whatever it is you're selling. And that's really all marketing is. It's communication at its base level and having those conversations. And so for the book publication process and the dreaming of it up, everybody has a story. Everybody has some lessons that they've learned, whether through life or business or both. Everyone, you are an expert in something. Whatever that special, unique thing is, you're an expert. And I believe that you have a book already inside of you. You already have content, you already have a mission and a message. So putting it into a book form is simply another way of leveraging the knowledge you already have and the content you already have to into a tangible or digital format that others can receive very easily. So that's kind of like the basis of a book. I think a lot of people are scared of the idea of, publishing a book. It's this big, huge deal. And, well, I'm not a writer. Like, how can I write a book? I was never good at English, or, my penmanship is bad. And it's like, none of that really matters because there's experts out there to help you with those areas that you are, not as expert in. But the whole point of a book is just telling your story in a different way, in some different way.
Yeah. So it was interesting because we were having a quick chat before we started recording, and I was saying, like, I was just part of a collaboration book where I wrote a chapter because I never really have had that dream. I feel like a lot of people do when they have the dream, New York Times bestseller, and they really want to be an author, and that's like, they want to write, that's kind of their goal, but that's not the only kind of criteria, I guess, in order to become an author. And I became a best-selling author from being in a collaboration book for writing a chapter, which quite honestly, like, poured out of me quite simply once I allowed myself to recognize that this isn't just about, like, it's not about having a book. It's about sharing a story that's going to make an impact, right?
Yes. Yes, and everybody has that story. And whatever your mission is for your business or for your life, whoever you're trying to reach and impact, this is just one other tool in your toolbox to be able to reach them in this way. And I love how you're already a New York bestselling author. That's amazing.
I mean, not the New York Times list. Let's be
Okay.
clear. That's not, but like Amazon bestselling, number one
Yeah.
bestselling. Yeah.
No, that's amazing. And, and it probably felt a lot simpler to you than you would have thought if you had sat down to think, oh, I need to write a book. It's very daunting, this process. And I think historically, years and years ago, it was a big process. You had to go and get a literary agent and find a publishing house that was going to work with you and want to sell your book. And there's still that option out there, but there were a lot of hurdles that you had to jump in order to get to that book published status. And I think what's brilliant about book publication right now is with all of the digital tools that we have, you don't have to jump through all those hurdles that you needed to before. Now, it doesn't mean that the process of writing a book and getting it published, it's a long process regardless. There's a lot of steps you have to go through. It's not an easy process, but it's a lot more attainable and accessible now that we have the self-publication tools available to us that we never had years ago. And you don't need somebody else's permission to publish your book, whereas before you needed somebody else's permission to even get on a bookshelf.
Oh, I love that message so much. You don't need somebody else's permission to publish a book. It's about what's on your heart, your story, and it's going to touch people. Like I see people all the time being worried about just from even just communications and like social media perspective, not wanting to share their story. Right. Or like, oh, my story doesn't matter. Right. Literally, I spoke to a woman who had been a burn victim. She had most of her body burned when she was 2 years old. And she felt like she didn't have a story. Right. Man. Like we all just downplay ourselves all the time. So what would you say, and how do you help encourage your clients to really like step into that and own that story?
Oh, that is such a good question. I think, we downplay ourselves. And so often we need somebody else to be able to come in as an external viewer. I can see what you can't, and helping you pull that story out and see the value in that you might not even realize yourself. And so I think just knowing that I'm a little lost.
Just like, yeah, you're just encouraging people to tap into their story. And sometimes we just need to be validated a little bit, right?
Yeah, and absolutely. I think it's the hardest thing to do is to write about yourself. It's so much easier to write about somebody else. So think of your story. One tip would be to think of your story as you're writing about somebody else. You're writing about somebody else's story. How would you explain what they've been through? If so that woman who was the burn victim, if she kind of steps out of that herself and looks at it from, if this was somebody else, would I see their story and would I see that it matters? Yes, you would. You'd hear, oh my gosh, look at all of the obstacles you overcame to get from here to there. Look at all that you lived through and grew through as a child, going through that experience. When you turn the focus off of yourself and put it out there in front of you, like you're looking at somebody else's story, I think it's a lot easier to then share that story. And at least start to think of the framework of how you would present it, because it's so much harder to write about yourself than about somebody else.
Such a great tip. Like try and set your ego aside, which is challenging. But if you can get yourself into that headspace and then start writing it like as if it was about somebody else, then maybe you won't have that same level or layer of what's the word where we critique self-critique, right?
Yes. And I think often we want, when we're thinking of things that we're writing about ourselves or for ourselves, we're so busy in our heads thinking about, well, what are other people going to think of how I'm saying this? What are they going to say about me when I'm sharing this story? There's this perception of, you're worried about what other people are going to think. And so you're really writing it in a way you think they want to hear it, to get this end result that you think they might want. But in doing that, we're losing the heart of the story and the true message when we're writing for somebody, what we think somebody else needs. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think when we, to let go of, like you said, that ego, and let's go of what other people think and those expectations of what this should be. What does a book have to be? Are the elements it needs to have? When you let go of that and just start to share your story, that's when the magic comes through. And you can always have somebody that's an editor or a copywriter, a ghostwriter come in and help finesse some of the rough spots. But when you get to the core of the story, I think that's where the magic really is. And that's when you're going to take what your content, your expertise, and really help and influence and impact your reader, is when you get to the heart of that story and start to tell that.
So what would be your main tip for how people can get started in the writing process?
I think the first thing would be to set aside the expectation that you have to be a certain way in order to write, that you have to have a certain degree, or you have to know how to craft a sentence, and just start writing. I know that there's a lot of different expertise out there and experience out there that tells you need to do it this way or that way or this way or that way, but it's, just do it your way. Just start, putting your thoughts on paper. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be pristine. And I think another thing too, we're such an audible culture now, listening to podcasts and live streams. We're so audible that if you have trouble putting pen to paper, why don't you just record yourself talking, tell your story, and then go back and you can have somebody transcribe that story. And that might be a way to get your story out without that complication of it has to be well written. Right. And I'm not saying
that. And I'm just going to say there's actually an app called Otterai that will transcribe your audio.
That's cool. Yeah, I feel like it's so much easier isn't it so much easier to talk through your story and just share your story in words verbally than it is to necessarily write it down? Probably. So, starting there, and I'm not saying, that everybody should go out and just write a piece of crap and publish it. That's not what I'm talking about. You want it to be, you want the final product to be something that's really going to make an impact. So you want it to be a good product. You want it to be a book that's easy to read and understand. But you don't have to start with that finished product. Yeah,
that's what I'm hearing you say, is that know that there's going to be revisions, get it out of your head, and then get someone else to look at it, right? I know that for me, part of working with an editor was making sure that things made sense, because sometimes, because it in your head, everything that happened, you're skipping things in the text, and they're like, I'm confused about this or that. So you need that other set of eyes. So it's really helpful to have somebody to look at your work and make sure that you're not filling in the gaps with just what's already in your head, right?
Absolutely. No, I worked with an author who had this huge imaginary world in this of realms and this incredible vision of this world and story that she was creating off of, that she understood, but I didn't. I wasn't in her brain for that whole entire world. So then it's as an editor, I was able to come in and say, okay, you're using this term, but this is part of your world term. It's not an everyday term. I don't know what that means. Can you describe that to me? Things that to her, she was so immersed in that story plot that she understood it. But having somebody on an outside perspective come in and say, you know what, I'm not connecting those dots. How, let's talk through it so we can make it clear for your intended audience. And that would be true with anything that you write, because you're obviously, especially for women, we have this trail of words going on in our head all the time. and we can see all these connections of how it ties together, but when we try to like tell somebody else about it, they're like, huh, like I don't, so I think getting it all down, getting it on paper, getting it into an audio format, and then having somebody else come in with that's completely outside of that process, and being able to ask those questions that your reader would ask, and kind of help you clarify it so that your message that you're intending to say is actually said.
Absolutely. I love that so much. That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom about this and really encouraging people to just take that leap and start writing their story down, because it's going to have more impact. And I know that you had a great quote that you shared with me at the beginning, which is, we all have a book inside of us. You have one, even if you're dreaming about it or not dreaming about it yet. Go dig for it. It's there for sure. Jessica, can you tell people where they can find you online to connect with you, and if you have any free tools or whatnot that you can share?
Absolutely. So my company is called Jessica Suggs Marketing. So you can find, that's my handle for Instagram, Facebook. It's my web address. So Jessica Suggs Marketing. And I have a blog out there. I have an email list, and just watching my Instagram stories, I've been really diving into this storytelling mode of how to share your story by actually sharing my story. So that's been a lot of fun to do. And I think that would be a great place for people to get to know me and to just kind of see it in action, that messy writing of story and how that resonates.
Love it. So amazing. Everybody go and connect with Jessica. The links will be below. We'll tag her below. Make sure that you can find her, send her a message, and let her know that you watched her on this interview. Okay, amazing. I'm going to wrap us up. Thank you so much.
Thank you.